They say mirrors never lie. But what if the mirror is hiding the lie of a man sworn to protect the truth? Detective Julian Harlow was the city's golden badge, a hero, a symbol of justice. Until one day, a whisper echoed from behind a two-way mirror. He lied under oath. He watched, and he did nothing. A closed case is suddenly wide open. A convicted man may be innocent. And the woman who died? She left behind clues, written in fear, hidden in code, pointing to the one man she once trusted. Now, as the past cracks open like shattered glass, one truth becomes clear. The mirror saw everything, and justice is still watching. The detective lied under oath behind the mirror. A story where lies are louder than confessions, and the glass never forgets. Before we dive deeper into this chilling mystery, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Past Portal Channel, where every story takes you beyond time into the secrets the world tried to bury. To those who've already supported us by liking, sharing, subscribing, and leaving your thoughts in the comments, thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Your support means everything. We also send out a heartfelt wish. May peace, clarity, and strength always guide you wherever your journey takes you. Now, let's open the portal to the truth behind the glass. The room was cold, too cold for a place meant to hold the truth. Its walls were gray, its air stale, and its only light came from a flickering bulb that buzzed like a dying insect. In the middle of it sat a man with trembling hands, eyes wide not with guilt, but with something far worse, fear. His voice cracked as he pointed to the large mirror on the wall. "He's there, watching, always watching. He lied under oath." On the other side of the glass, Detective Julian Harlow did not flinch. His face, stone and silent, betrayed nothing. But inside, something ancient stirred. A name, a case, a night buried deep within his conscience began clawing its way to the surface. Julian left the room in measured steps, ignoring the chaos behind him. Officers murmured about the suspect's instability. A defense attorney threatened legal action, and the captain demanded a psychiatric review. But none of it touched Julian. His mind had frozen back in time, to that one moment, the one he never allowed himself to revisit. The mirror, the one from Evelyn Reed's case. She was the journalist who had asked too many questions and whose death brought Julian a medal and a closed case. But it also brought a secret, one so dark it had sunk beneath his polished surface like a stone dropped in still water. Now, that water was rippling. Julian stood alone in the observation hallway, facing the mirror. His own reflection stared back, unblinking, expressionless. He reached out, letting his fingers hover just shy of the glass. It felt colder than the air, colder than the memory he had kept locked away. Behind that mirror, years ago, a man had screamed his innocence. Julian had watched it all, said nothing, and later he swore under oath that justice had been served. But now the scream was back, echoing from the depths, and this time it was louder. The rain was merciless that night, tapping against the precinct windows like impatient fingers. Julian sat at his desk, staring blankly at the commendation plaque hanging crooked on the wall. It bore his name in gold, commemorating his successful resolution of the Evelyn Reed's murder case. To the world, it was an airtight conviction. Evelyn's boyfriend, Miles Hensley, had confessed under pressure. The motive was jealousy, and Julian's testimony in court sealed the verdict. But Julian remembered the interrogation clearly. It wasn't jealousy he saw in Miles' eyes. It was confusion and dread, the kind that only grows when a man knows he's been cornered for something he didn't do. It had all started with Evelyn's work. She was fearless, always chasing something bigger than headlines. The last time Julian saw her alive, she had confronted him about corruption in the force, slipping him a flash drive with encrypted files and whispering, "Don't trust the ones behind the glass." A week later, she was found dead in her apartment, a single blow to the head, her notes missing, her computer wiped clean. Miles was arrested within hours. Julian, still shaken by her final words, had walked into the interrogation room, but chose silence. It was easier to follow the current than to swim against what he couldn't yet understand. That choice turned him into a hero. Reporters praised his precision. The captain called him the future of the department. But Julian knew the truth was more fragile than anyone believed. In his quiet moments, he saw Evelyn's blood pooling on the floor, her eyes frozen in a question he had never dared to answer. And now, with that suspect's rant earlier ringing in his head, Julian felt the walls of his carefully built legacy start to crack. The truth was never buried. It was staring straight at him from the other side of that mirror, waiting for him to finally look back. The envelope arrived without warning. No return address, no sender's name, only a red wax seal pressed with the shape of an eye. Inside was a cassette tape, the kind no one used anymore, and a note written in tight mechanical lettering. "Play it where the mirror cannot see." Julian locked his office door, slid the tape into the last working player in the evidence room, and pressed play. The recording crackled with static before a voice emerged, distorted, anonymous, yet steady. He lied under oath. He stood behind the mirror and watched innocence be destroyed. He is not justice. He is the silence that justice fears. Then a long pause, followed by a final whisper. "Find the missing tape from Evelyn's case, before they do." The next morning, Internal Affairs had already heard the audio. Sarah Blythe, Julian's former partner, now wore the uniform of an internal investigator. Her expression was unreadable as she questioned him. "Did you coerce a confession from Miles Hensley?" she asked flatly. Julian shook his head, but her eyes lingered on him, sharp and unforgiving. She brought up an alarming fact. One of the interrogation tapes from Evelyn's case was unaccounted for in the official archive. The night Miles broke down on camera, no copy existed. Julian's stomach twisted. He remembered handing the tape to someone, but not who. Or maybe he'd tried too hard to forget. That evening, Sarah revisited the precinct's digital logs, combing through who accessed the archive in the days after Evelyn's death. A name appeared repeatedly. A lieutenant who had transferred to another city weeks after the case closed. She flagged it, but something about Julian's behavior kept pulling her attention. He had been distant, defensive, too precise in his wording. He was no longer the man she once trusted. And deep down, Sarah wondered, was Julian hiding something from the department, or was he hiding from himself? As she walked past the interrogation wing, she stopped before the two-way mirror, staring into her own reflection. For a split second, she thought she saw someone else standing there. Julian returned to the precinct long after midnight, when only the hum of vending machines and the ticking of an old clock dared to make a sound. The hallway to the interrogation rooms stretched ahead of him like a tunnel into the past. He unlocked room B12, the one with the mirror. The room smelled of bleach and old lies. He stepped inside, turned off the main light, and stood behind the glass, watching the empty chair on the other side. It was in this very room that Miles Hensley had cried, begged, and ultimately confessed. Julian clenched his fists. He remembered watching him from behind this very mirror. But what he had never told anyone was what he saw that night, what he saw behind the reflection. It was a movement, barely visible, a shadow gliding across the glass when no one else was in the room. At the time, Julian dismissed it as fatigue, a hallucination brought on by stress. But it returned, twice more during the same interrogation. The same ripple in the mirror, like something behind the glass was shifting, breathing. Then came the whisper, not from Miles, but from the room Julian was in, the supposed unseen side. He's not the one. Julian never reported it. He never played the full tape in court. He submitted an edited copy, one that conveniently muted that moment. From that day forward, he avoided the mirror room, locking away not just evidence, but memory. But now, standing in front of that same glass, Julian was no longer sure if what he remembered was a ghost of guilt or a fragment of truth. He looked deeper into the mirror. His reflection stared back, older, hollow, hunted. Then something shifted again. Not a sound, not a flash, just a shift in the depth of the glass. As if someone was watching him from behind it. He stepped closer. His breath fogged the surface. Then a faint handprint appeared on the other side, matching his exactly. But he hadn't touched it yet. His heart pounded. The mirror was no longer just glass. It was a witness, and it was trying to speak.
Sarah sat in the dim archives room, surrounded by dust and the weight of forgotten files. After hours of digging, she found it. An evidence box misfiled under a case number that didn't exist. Inside were fragments of Evelyn Reed's belongings, sealed in plastic. A pen, a broken phone, and a small leather notebook labeled only with 2 initials, J.H. She flipped it open and scanned the pages. Most were covered in Evelyn's neat, hurried handwriting. But toward the end, her writing turned erratic, looping and sharp. One page stopped her cold. The mirror knows. He watches from behind it, but he's not alone. If I disappear, find Julian. He knows where the silence starts. Sarah's blood ran cold. She took the notebook to her apartment, avoiding eyes at the station. There, under a desk lamp, she read Evelyn's final entries. They weren't just personal thoughts, they were warnings. Evelyn had discovered more than corruption. She had linked several officers to a secret network of evidence tampering, false testimonies, and cover-ups, all recorded in a code she had designed. Julian's name appeared not as the villain, but as a pivot. He was there. He could have spoken. He chose silence. Why? That line echoed in Sarah's mind. The deeper she read, the clearer it became. Julian hadn't killed Evelyn, but he had known who might, and instead of stopping them, he had obeyed. When Sarah confronted Julian at his apartment, he looked like a man already carrying his own gravestone. She laid the notebook on the table. He didn't even open it. "I know what it says," he murmured. "She trusted me. I told her to stop digging. I thought if she stayed quiet, they'd let her be." His voice cracked for the first time in years. But she didn't, and when I saw her body, I knew. The silence didn't protect her. It erased her. Sarah wanted to scream, to accuse, but instead she asked, "Who is they?" Julian didn't answer. He only looked toward the dark corner of the room, toward the old mirror leaning against the wall, and he whispered, "They're still watching." The interrogation chamber smelled like it always had: metal, stale air, and secrets. This time, Julian sat on the suspect's side of the table. His wrists weren't cuffed, but the weight of guilt around him made them feel heavier than steel. Across from him, Sarah stood, not as a friend or a partner, but as the lead investigator. Cameras rolled silently, the red recording light blinking like a heartbeat. Behind the glass, senior officers and internal affairs agents watched without expression. Julian didn't look at them. He looked at the mirror, the same one he had stood behind for years, the one that knew him better than anyone else. When Sarah asked him why he was ready to talk, Julian answered simply, "Because the mirror won't stop reflecting." His voice cracked as he began to speak. "I lied under oath. I knew Miles Hensley was innocent. I saw something the night of the interrogation, a shadow, a voice, something not on tape. I was told to keep it out of the record. They said Evelyn's death was unrelated, that it was domestic, clean. But it wasn't. She was working on a story, something massive. She had the names. Some of them wore the same badge I did. Julian's hands trembled as he continued. They didn't just want her quiet, they wanted her erased. And when I testified, I gave them the match to burn the rest. Gasps escaped from behind the mirror. The silence was no longer protection, it was evidence. Sarah leaned forward, her eyes not cold, but resolute. Who are they, Julian? Who gave the order? Julian lowered his eyes. I never knew the top. Orders came through a voice on a line, through unsigned memos, through people I trusted. I was a coward. I told myself I was protecting the department, but I was really just protecting myself. The light above flickered as if the room itself was listening. Julian looked at the mirror one last time. Whoever's behind that glass, they've always been there, watching, recording, making sure I stayed quiet. He stood up slowly, but not anymore. And with that, Julian turned to face his reflection, not with fear, but with resolve. They sealed Julian's confession into 3 separate hard drives, labeled and time-stamped, then filed it in evidence under restricted access. Internal Affairs moved swiftly, opening investigations into the names Julian mentioned, but many of them had already vanished, retired early, transferred abroad, or mysteriously reassigned. The system they were part of had hollowed itself out long before the spotlight arrived. Sarah stood alone in the mirror room 2 nights later, holding Evelyn's notebook tight against her chest. The precinct was quiet again, too quiet. She turned toward the two-way mirror. Her own face stared back, drawn, older, resolved. But then she saw it, a flicker, a blink, and she hadn't blinked. Behind the glass, a light came on, not from the observation room, but from within the wall. Sarah stepped forward, pressed her palm against the mirror, and felt a faint vibration. It was hollow. She grabbed a flashlight and traced the edges of the glass until she found a latch, old, rusted, but real. She pried it open. Behind it, hidden within the structure, was a crawl space laced with wires, audio relays, and a single black camera, still recording. A red light blinked silently. It wasn't the department's equipment. This was older, installed deep behind the official system. Someone else had been watching every interrogation for years, every confession, every scream, every silence. She retrieved the camera's memory card and played the footage at home. What she saw chilled her to the marrow. Dozens of recordings, including Evelyn's final interview with Miles, unedited. Evelyn had spoken to someone just off camera before the questioning began. A voice had whispered to her, the same distorted voice from the anonymous cassette. Then, in the corner of one frame, a face appeared, one Sarah knew well. Not a superior, not a suspect, but a fellow officer, still active, still walking the halls. Sarah exhaled slowly. The mirror had been a gate all along, not between truth and lies, but between justice and the people who fear it most. And now, the mirror had finally spoken. In cities across Europe, where old buildings hide centuries of secrets and cafes buzz with quiet conversations, the idea of truth is often seen as something noble yet fragile. People walk past courthouses carved in stone, believing justice stands tall inside. But behind every mirror and every system, there may still be someone watching, someone deciding what version of the truth is allowed to survive. This story is not only about a detective or a broken promise. It is about silence, about what happens when we let comfort over conscience. In neighborhoods of Paris or Berlin, and London flats or Lisbon squares, silence can be as dangerous as any crime when it protects the wrong side of the glass. Thank you for watching Ask Portal Channel. If this story made you think twice about what hides behind appearances, do not forget to like the video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with others. Your support helps uncover the stories the world tried to forget.